So it's a widely discussed issue, but I want to ask the question first. What is your take on multiculturalism? Zuhair, let's start with you first.
I love multiculturalism. I've loved Trudeau. I think it's done immense good for this country. It's brought us hundreds of millions of dollars of business as people who've maintained their culture, the languages, have gone all over the world and sold Canada. These are Canadians who have made good for this country, who are generating enough wealth to pay our pensions.
You have, now I won't say a different view, but you have a different sense of multiculturalism.
I think multiculturalism is a great concept, but in Canada, in practice, it's a broken model. It doesn't work anymore, and I think it's time that that's what I like about this debate today. I think what we should be talking about is what is multiculturalism and why it needs to be fixed and where we have gone wrong.
Okay, so where has it gone wrong?
I give you an illustration. In June we're going to be having the IFA Awards, for which the government of Ontario is going to be spending millions of dollars. That is also multiculturalism, Year of India in Canada and so on. At the same time, just last year, the federal government cut spending for the heritage language classes. So that's also multiculturalism. So you see that multiculturalism is all about, these days, it seems to me, songs and samosas and saris, but it's not really the concept. The reason why multiculturalism was thought of in this country and the way it is being executed, even immigrants, new immigrants are looking at it and saying, is this really what this country is all about? What is the meaning of multiculturalism? And I think that as we debate further on this subject, we'll find that this is a model that's broken and it needs to be fixed.
So, Zuhair, what are your thoughts on what he's saying?
I'm sure there are problems with multiculturalism. I'm sure there's some stuff to be fixed. But I don't agree with Easwar's views that when you have a headache, you cut off the head. You throw the baby out of the bathwater. I mean, multiculturalism has served us really well. The whole thing is, either way you go, if you're an immigrant with millions of dollars coming in, you want to feel at home in this country. You're bringing in all this money, you want to feel at home, knowing fully well that your kids are going to grow up and they will be gone. They will not be as Indian or as Pakistani or as Chinese as you are.
Right.
Otherwise, you bring in workers. You bring in workers who work here. You want them to feel at home. We need these workers. There's a reason why Stephen Harper has got the highest number of immigrants last year, 285,000. It's because if you don't have these people coming in and creating wealth, as studies by the business professor Harish Jain at McMaster University has shown, there will be no money to pay your pension and my pension. We need these people. So you bring them in, you make them feel at home, they are there, the kids go to school, and then the kids are less.
But that's the point. Is this system working? A century ago, the first Sikhs arrived in this country. The fact that the three of us are sitting here and talking about multiculturalism and whether it really works or not tells you that there's something seriously wrong with it.
That we're questioning it.
Yeah, that we're questioning it. 100 years after the first Sikhs arrived in this country, we're still talking about multiculturalism and whether kirpan should be allowed here, whether niqab should be allowed here. I mean, there is something seriously wrong with this picture. When the first Chinese arrived here to build Canada's railroads, Canada welcomed them, and they built the railroads. And once the railroads were built, Canada imposed head tax on them.
Yeah.
This happened even before all this. If you go back before multiculturalism, you had the Doukhobors in Western Canada. They had their own traditions where they paraded naked through the streets. There were problems. So there were problems even before that. So you have the kirpan, you have the niqab. I mean, this has nothing to do with multiculturalism. It's not the fault of multiculturalism that the Sikhs want to wear the kirpans. That's their religion. The Doukhobors wanted to go naked. That was their tradition.
I totally agree with you. I totally agree with you. But still, the policy of multiculturalism as it is being practiced in Canada today, and I think we have to take a very serious look at it. Otherwise, it is all show and no substance.
Is it a question of integration? When we look at countries like France, where we look at countries like Germany, they have said, well, we think multiculturalism is flawed. When someone comes to our country, it's a matter of them integrating into society and learning about how we do our things and how we live our lives and the types of cultures and traditions we have, rather than society remodifying itself to integrate into your
Good question.
culture. So, is that the case where we're talking about integration versus segregation? You know, and then when we're looking at Canada, how does that play out?
I don't think you can compare France and Germany with Canada. Germany and France are homogeneous societies, while Canada is several cultures coexist here. There is not one single Canadian culture. We don't have a shared Canadian culture.
Right.
We have shared Canadian values.
We do have the two solitudes, French and Anglo.
Yeah, but
French
into that
Yeah.
solitude, you now have the Indians coming in, you now have the South Asians coming in, you have Chinese coming in, and those solitudes are not going to remain solitudes for long. There are going to be several islands of ethnicities.
But Easwar, unlike France and Germany, Canadians have opened themselves up to receive these foreigners. I'm not talking of Quebec. I'll come to Quebec a little later.
Yeah, we'll talk about that in a
But
minute.
the English Canada has opened itself up. With Germany, I mean, Angela Merkel says multiculturalism has failed. The Turkish immigrants are not being German enough. Well, you know what? For years, for decades, they've refused to grant them German citizenship. You go into France, one of the most racist societies you can imagine. You know, here are these people, they came from North Africa, they all speak French, they've taken on French culture, a lot of the women from among them are the top models in France, but guess what? As soon as the whole thing about Islam starts, immediately they barricade themselves. Okay, no, you've got to be
So
like...
is it a question of identity? Is that what the concern is, preserving one's identity?
Even before you get into the question of identity, what's happening in Canada is that people come from all parts of the world, and then they go into self-segregating societies of their own. We are in Bramptons and Mississaugas and Scarboroughs and Richmond Hills of Canada, where those are becoming self-segregated societies within the Canadian mosaic.
I'm going to hold you right there on that point because I'm going to throw it a break now. We're going to come back after commercial, and we're going to talk about identity and then get into the Quebec issue. So we'll be back after this short break.
Okay.
Let's continue now with part 2 of our debate on multiculturalism with political commentator Zuhair Kashmeri and G.A Easwar, the publisher of Desi News and CanadaBound, Immigrant.
Okay, welcome back. So we were touching on this issue, we're talking about this issue of identity and whether or not that's something that needs to be protected, or whether these arguments are coming up protecting national identity.
But before we get to the question of identities, what I wanted to say was, before we went on break, is that I think Canada is getting ghettoized, right? These ethnic enclaves that are happening, they are getting self-contained places where, while we're talking about integration, these enclaves are not really integrating with the rest of the Canadian society. And so multiculturalism is a two-way street. You know, while it was conceived to be where to welcome the newcomers and help them integrate into the Canadian society, and at the same time to help Canadians feel more welcoming towards the newcomers.
You don't think that's happening enough?
I think that is happening less and less as the numbers of certain ethnicities becoming predominant among the visible minority group. What's happening is that we are getting enclaves which are just of one ethnicity. And those don't mix with the rest. And how often I find, in the course of meeting Canadians, Desi Canadians here, that many of them don't even speak the language. Many of them don't mix with the rest of the Canadian society, don't go watch a play. It's all about living within that little cage.
30 years ago, when I was a reporter in Brampton, we had an entire development which was full of people. They were all white, but they were all from Newfoundland. They didn't mix with anybody, and nobody even raised an eyebrow except the cops, who kept saying that crime was coming from there. We had another enclave full of Irish. They were all supporters of the IRA. Nobody said that's a ghetto and that they're keeping to themselves.
There's a very big difference between the white Caucasian immigrants that came out of Europe and the visible minority immigrants coming out of India and China and the subcontinent. The reason is this, let me tell you, is that the white Caucasian Canadians, first generation, speaks Portuguese, speaks Italian, but the second generation speaks English, and they're part of the Canadian society.
The third generation is going back to Portuguese and Italian.
No, they're mainstream.
Okay, so I want to come back then. It seems like even though we're skirting around the idea of identity, whether they're maintaining that within their own little cliques or enclaves or whatnot.
I don't like the word ghettoization because it's not ghettoizing.
So what about it you don't like?
If you're white, it's not ghettoizing. If you're colored, it's ghettoizing. I mean, that to me is a very, I hate using the word racist, but that's a very racist way of looking at it. This is what Preston Manning, Bill Van der Zam in BC, these real extreme right-wing people, this is how they differentiated white Canadians from the rest of them. This is what they're doing in Quebec, and we'll come to Quebec.
So let's talk about Quebec. Let's talk about the issue of the kirpan. Let's talk about the issue of the niqab. We know that in Quebec it is an issue. It's been debated. There is resistance.
I think that's an entirely different issue.
Well, maybe it is and maybe it isn't. So the question I'm going to ask you is if it's come up in Quebec, and we know that Quebec has its own thoughts and issues about its own identity and preserving that, and its own nationalism and preserving that. But if we look at Canada as a whole, is this something that we could be seeing in other provinces and other cities? Let's look at our own city here in Toronto. We're the most multicultural city in the world.
I don't see it happening in Toronto, and I think that these days, you know, when an immigrant comes out of applies for immigration to Canada, they expect to come to a country which is going to be inclusive, which is going to be accepting of them, and they know that if the person is a Sikh, he's going to wear a kirpan. And if you don't like such a person to come here, don't let him immigrate. But if a kirpan wearing Sikh or a niqab wearing Muslim comes to Canada, and I think it's only fair that you should let them practice what they have been practicing, what they expect to practice in Canada.
Angie, the Supreme Court of Canada has said that Sikhs can wear the kirpan anywhere. All they have to do is have a secure sheath, and that's it. This is the Supreme Court of Canada. Quebec is turning around and saying, oh, we don't care if it's the Supreme Court of Canada. We are Quebecers. We make our own law. I mean, give me a break. Either you want to be part of Canada or you don't want to be part of Canada. This is the Supreme Court of your country that's saying this. Quebecers have had the chip on the shoulder with multiculturalism right from day one. When Trudeau first proclaimed it, Quebec got up and said, multiculturalism is simply being enacted to completely diffuse and put down the Quebec identity. Because that was their big issue, is the Quebec identity. And I mean, let's face it, a kirpan or a niqab does not do anything about identity, because a woman from Algeria or Tunisia, they speak French. She could have a niqab, but she still speaks more fluent French, probably more modern French than a lot of Quebecers from the outlying regions of Quebec.
Will this be an overall issue for Canada as a whole? A country that prides itself on multiculturalism, that brings in immigrants, as you said and as you both have said, to help work with the economy. These are skilled professionals that are coming in. Is this going to be an overall concern that we have these questions being raised within our country?
I don't think in the rest of Canada it is an issue. I think a kirpan wearing Sikh is not a thug, and therefore, and I don't think he's a danger to the society. A baseball bat can be a weapon, if kirpan can be a weapon. A baseball bat carrying a thug could be a danger to the society. You don't ban baseball bats, so why would you ban kirpans? And that goes with all the religious symbols. And I don't think Canada has an issue with religious symbols as such, as it is in France or in other countries around the world. But I think that the question of multiculturalism itself has to be looked upon differently from a different perspective so that it is more productive. Canada spends millions of dollars on multiculturalism, but I don't think multiculturalism is used in a productive way that benefits the entire society. And that's my point.
I work in the financial industry, and I work with visible minorities from Korea, from China, from India. These are second generation. They have grown up, they all feel they're Indo-Canadians, but they are very Canadian. There is no problem, they've integrated. I don't know what the issue is here.
Okay, we're going to have to wrap it up now, but just very quickly, 15 seconds.
I don't think it's a question of, I don't agree with the phrase no problem, because there is a problem. More and more new immigrants that I meet and see on a day-to-day basis, they tell me that this multiculturalism is all fine, it's all song and dance, but it needs more, it doesn't have the substance that to make it more productive. And it's also some, even with a sense of suspicion of political manipulations, tend to see it as a way of the old British style of divide and conquer. Divide the communities into various ethnic enclaves. You have ready-made vote banks, and go to those vote banks and get your votes, so that you have Brampton, Springdale, you have North Etobicoke, and so on and so forth. But I think that this politics behind multiculturalism has to go away, and I think it has got to be more substantial. It's got to put more meat into it.
Well, we're going to see what happens. I think it's probably an issue, even though we say, why are we debating it? We're probably going to discuss it again.
As long as they don't walk about with baseball bats, we should be okay.
No. Well, we're going to leave it at that. Gentlemen, I appreciate you coming in to talk to us today. Wonderful discussion, wonderful debate. Your insights are definitely appreciated. Thank you very much.
Thank you.